The official trailer for State of Decay 3 from Undead Labs is out, and it is big news. In this video, I'll briefly give you my thoughts and feelings about the trailer itself before moving on to a more forensic analysis of its content, looking at the visuals and the audio to deduce what might be coming out from State of Decay 3 going forward. Overall, I thought the trailer was fantastic. First and foremost, it looks stunning. Unreal Engine 5 has allowed Undead Labs to elevate the visuals to the next level. Whether you like everything that you see in the trailer or not, you have to admit, graphically it's a huge step up from State of Decay 2 thanks to this new engine. I feel the trailer leans more into the horror survival genre, with its darkness, its suspense, and the menacing, malevolent juggernaut at the end. There's definitely a big focus on multiplayer aspects, reminiscent of how groups came together in State of Decay 2. In fact, this trailer is reminiscent of the State of Decay 2 release trailer from 2016. Continuity and evolution are key themes. We're seeing familiar elements from State of Decay 2, like the Screamer and the Juggernaut, but they are enhanced, and zombies have evolved, or devolved depending how you look at it, and the map looks expansive, promising a lot more gameplay. Now, as we analyse the trailer, we'll highlight these evolutionary points. We can see that the graphics are better, we can hear that the sound design is amazing, and the gameplay looks fantastic. There's definitely a strong emphasis on the survivor story, evident in the dialogue over the trailer. Overall, this trailer is signature State of Decay. It is absolutely unmistakable and a significant evolution from what we saw years ago in 2020. We'll touch on these differences later, but for now, let's get into the details. So straight off the bat, a nice little Easter egg. That keyring, I'm sure, is a Bronto gas keyring, which I would buy myself if I could. The second thing in here, the trailer contains in-game footage and cinematics, but the way that it's so seamless lends itself to us thinking that, you know, what we see is what we'll get. I'm loving that the zombies have yellow eyes. There was always something really scary about those zombies from State of Decay 1 with the yellow eyes, more so than the red-eyed zombies from State of Decay 2. Evolution again. Undead Labs logo looks amazing. Opening scene, what we can see is a vast, rugged terrain full of trees, covering quite a large area, which gives me the feeling that the world itself will have these kind of wooded rural areas. And of course, you can see in the background, there is a very unnatural flame or smoke cloud, which is the epicenter of what's going to happen in this trailer. At this point, we're treated to one badass vehicle. It looks a little bit like the Myragra from State of Decay 2, but it's definitely got some improvements. As we look at this vehicle, we see that it has some bull bars, a souped up engine, maybe a supercharger. It also has spotlights, storage racks, and is well armored. What we might be seeing here is modular upgrading across vehicles. Now, I might be reading way too much into this, but in my communities, my vehicles end up being as valuable as my community survivors themselves. So to be able to have a vehicle journey arc, similar to a character journey arc in this game, would be awesome. And speaking of character journeys, let's rewind and back up a bit here. Now, the dialogue in this trailer is a lament, from a survivor to a lost companion. But within her dialogue is some tantalizing clues as to what might be coming from a narrative or story arc point of view. Just have a listen to these three questions again.
Who were you before? Who did you love? What did you believe?
These three questions are more complex than any question you would ask a State of Decay 2 character.
It's too late to ask now.
State of Decay 2 characters were procedurally generated. They came with skills, traits, and basic personalities. Beyond the simple traits, they didn't really have any specific backstory or story arcs beyond their leadership types. It is here, I believe, State of Decay 3 will expand greatly on the character generation from State of Decay 2. Who were you before is a question that suggests a player-driven narrative. What were you before, and how might that shape your future? How might that shape missions? How might that shape how your character behaves in certain situations and with different dialogue options? Who did you love? Here it's suggesting interpersonal relationships, either between survivors within a community or possibly with AI characters, NPCs, out in the broader world. What did you believe? In State of Decay 3, I can see an entire backstory and belief system sitting behind each character, which drives their responses, missions, and story arcs. I believe this is how Undead Labs will balance the open world character-driven stories with a stronger story narrative without making the game too linear. It will be a fine balance that they will need to strike, but I have every confidence that they will. This might sound fanciful thinking, but when you consider how many skills and traits are in State of Decay 2, I am excited to see what they will do in this space. But let's move on to something a bit more tangible: crafting. Now in this scene we see the survivor approaching Zombie with what looks like a heavily modified hacksaw. You certainly wouldn't find one of these hanging on the wall at Walmart. And later, we get a good view of the stock on his firearm, which is definitely non-standard. As the trailer contains in-game assets, we can only assume that we will find these weapons within the game, or the ability to craft them. This is also supported by the developers in an interview to Xbox Live, where they state that State of Decay 3 has been picked over by now, and finding components to modify their existing weapons will be much more likely than looting a wholly formed one that's ready to go. And also say, this means that players will be able to customize their play experience to a greater depth than they have in the past, and that they believe that investing time to craft your crossbow versus finding a few generic crossbow types is going to be a lot more fun. And I would have to agree with that. Now whether they're going to go full on Fallout 4 in terms of weapon crafting, I'm not sure, but there is definitely going to be more customization and personalization of weapons in State of Decay 3. But it does not stop there. There is a ton more clues and revelations that we can glean from the upcoming combat involving our 4 intrepid survivors. Firstly, the fact that there are 4 survivors suggests a much greater focus on the multiplayer element of the game. And if we look at what is posted on Steam, it states, with online multiplayer for up to 4 players, start a community together from scratch with your friends in a shared persistent world. You'll be able to build, develop, and expand a base that reflects your designs and choices. Shared persistent world. That means there is no requirement for a local host, so you can kiss goodbye to tethering forever. You'll also be able to work as a team to build a base together, instead of just buddies who jump in for the ride. But let's step through this combat scene and see what clues we can derive. First, we see a survivor climbing on top of a van. Now the van is a Dewey's Hardware van that we saw in State of Decay 2, and as her erstwhile friends jump the fence to come to her aid, we see a Bronto gas. I'm guessing that Dewey's Hardware is a small local franchise, which suggests that where this combat is taking place is close to the original areas that we saw in State of Decay 2. This shouldn't be a surprise, as State of Decay 1 and 2 have both featured Trumbull Valley, and I believe that we will see Trumbull Valley in State of Decay 3 for those purposes of continuity. Now during this gameplay scene, we actually see a new building, River Depot or something like that, I assume it's Depot. This is a different brand, which we did not see in State of Decay 2. We may be in the same area that we were in State of Decay 2, but this suggests there is new territory that bonds State of Decay 3 to State of Decay 2. Speaking of Bronto gas, you will see that the state of this gas station is in serious disrepair. It's on the edge of collapse, and as we compare that to Bronto gas that we see in State of Decay 2, we can assume that a fair period of time has passed in between the franchises. I would hazard a guess at 10 to 15 years, but I'm no engineer. But what we can imagine is a lot of the buildings and dwellings and sites that we saw in State of Decay 2 will now be a lot more broken down, a lot more treacherous even for scavenging and the like. Now the fact that our survivor is actually climbing on top of a vehicle to fight the zombies answers one of the great conundrums from State of Decay 2, which is climbing on a vehicle cheating? In State of Decay 2, zombies and ferals could not path onto the top of vehicles, yet they were physically capable of leaping over 2.5 meter concrete walls. So this was a disconnect in the game of what should happen from what actually happened, but they seem to have solved this for State of Decay 3. If we look at the zombies and how they behave, they have almost devolved. So the zombies will be slower, less agile, They will still be strong and dangerous, I imagine, but I doubt we'll be able to see them climb onto vehicles, jump over fences, and basically act like the crazy ninja-charged zombies that we saw in State of Decay 2, especially on the harder difficulty levels. We also see the trailer cuts between real gameplay and cinematic, and it's almost seamless. It's beautiful. Kneecapping zombies, kicking and shoving zombies into objects, and the third-person perspective is still true to the original, but it just looks amazing on this graphics engine. If this is what we're going to experience in State of Decay 3, take my money right now. As we look at the Screamer, we can see that the Plague has evolved. The Plague appears to be yellow, which is a much better colour as I've stated earlier, but the Screamer looks truly fearsome now. If the zombies have devolved, then the danger and the threat must come from the freaks, which means they must have evolved. Otherwise the game will just be easier. I think we might be in for some surprises with the freaks. I don't really have any predictions around how each freak may evolve, but hopefully we'll get some more insight from Undead Labs from future trailers. We see a character bearing a physical scar on her face. Was this part of her backstory? Was this scar the result of an encounter with the undead? Is it possible to get permanent injuries from your encounters in State of Decay 3? I have no answer for these questions, but they are intriguing. Coming back to evolution, the trailer also gives us a first look at what Infestations and the Plague would look like in State of Decay 3. So here are my thoughts on these changes. First up, as I said, the Plague has evolved. No longer confined to isolated plague hearts scattered across the map, it has become more of an environmental threat. This evolution is a significant shift from what we've seen in previous games. Since the launch of State of Decay 2, Undead Labs has gradually integrated infestation mechanics with plague heart mechanics. Initially, plague hearts were just discrete spawn boxes in random locations, while infestations also appeared seemingly randomly on the map. Now plague hearts have their own territory and can wake up other plague hearts when attacked. They are also now the original source of infestations. In State of Decay 3, this integration goes even further. The infestations and plague mechanics are now part of a new, living, environmental entity. The plague spreads and retreats like a fungus, responding dynamically to player action. In the trailer, you can see the yellow-orange miasma of the plague and strange pumpkin-looking pods. These are the new manifestations of the plague. As environmental elements, they will have environmental impacts, such as increasing the number of zombies and freaks, and possibly with enhanced senses and abilities. These pods will grow and multiply in number over time, becoming a core part of the map and game mechanics. This integration promises to make the plague feel more like a natural part of the world, deeply embedded in the game's fabric. For State of Decay 3, I imagine the source of the plague being like pools of lava seething in some subterranean cave, sprouting tendrils that spread out and burst onto the landscape. While this is just my own vision and imagination, it aligns with the idea of the plague being entrenched in the map and in the gaming experience in a similar way. And then something which made me actually leap for joy out of my chair, this trailer cut to the scene with the memorial wall. I love this. I've been asking for it. A memorial wall where you can have photos and memorabilia of your characters in order to remember them over time, and possibly some statistics around how long they survived, where they fell, how many people they saved, who they saved. The longer your community endures, the more they'll have these stories, which are the true currency of State of Decay. However, if there was one thing missing from this trailer that I would have loved to have seen, active weather systems. Throughout the entire trailer there is not a breath of wind, but I would love to see in any future trailers ambient wind and ambient rain in State of Decay 3. The last thing we need to talk about is the undead deer in the room, which is the original trailer from 2020. In my view, these game trailers are poles apart. The original trailer depicts a sole survivor operating alone, whereas the new trailer highlights a group of 4 survivors working together. In the original trailer, we see the survivors sleeping rough, without a proper base. This contrasts sharply with the new trailer, which suggests a more established and fortified living situation for the character. I mean, they must if they have an upgraded vehicle. You need a base to do that. The original trailer is set in a mountainous winter environment featuring snow and wind. The new trailer, however, lacks any active weather systems that we've seen so far, but we may get some active weather elements, which would be fantastic. One of the most striking elements in the 2020 trailer is the presence of wildlife and zombie wildlife, something that wasn't featured or referenced in the State of Decay franchise. We see the creepy undead deer, which raises several questions about its role in the game. Interestingly, there are no recognizable State of Decay freaks, zombies, or any familiar elements in the original trailer. The aesthetic and thematic elements feel so different that I could slap a 7 Days to Die logo on the original and you might believe it. Some of these features could make it into the final game, but how would undead deer interact with the world? Would they travel with hordes, or have more of an environmental impact from plague incursions? And if there is to be undead wildlife, then logically there should be living wildlife as well. This raises the question, would hunting be part of the game? And is that what State of Decay 3 is all about? Personally, I have all but abandoned the original trailer as a good indicator of what we might see in State of Decay 3. But look, hey, this entire video has just been my thoughts and conjecture about what we might see from State of Decay 3 in the future. It may look completely different to what I'm proposing here. What I will say is that every update that I've seen come out from Undead Labs, even if it doesn't land the first time, they do get it right. And I have a strong feeling that for State of Decay 3, they will take the time to take all those learnings and hit a home run from the outset. So what do you think? When you watch the trailer, do you see the things that I'm seeing? Has there been anything really obvious that I've missed? There was a lot we didn't see in this video. What would you want to see in the next State of Decay 3 trailer? Let me know in the comments. I've really enjoyed bringing this to you. I hope you found it informative and entertaining. I'm Guru. Wherever you are in the world, go in peace. Ka kite. Bye for now.